As we continue our study on the doctrine of the church, we've now come to the issue of how should church officers be chosen. And so there's two major types of process in the way church officers are chosen. There's a selection by a higher authority in a hierarchy type denomination like Roman Catholicism. Church of England broke off from Roman Catholicism. Episcopalians are the American form of Church of England. You have Methodists that broke out of the Church of England. Those have a hierarchy approach, and so they're chosen from the top down. Or there's a selection by a local congregation, which is the majority of Protestants, including Baptists, where the congregation comes together and selects their officers, whether it's pastors or deacons, or if they call them elders, something along those lines. We see that among Baptists, we see that among Assembly of God, we see that among lots of different groups. Presbyterian kind of has a mixed thing where they have an assembly that helps them out, but then the local congregation has some say so. We'll talk more about that another time. So what New Testament evidence do we see? Well, we do see examples where church officers were chosen by the whole congregation. Acts chapter 6, verse 3, whether those were deacons or not, I've argued another passage. I think they're more like associate pastors or what might have become the first pastors after the apostles passed from the scene. The men selected to serve the widows were chosen by the congregation in Acts chapter 6. The two men in Acts chapter 1 who were put forward, one of which was to replace Judas in Acts 1 verse 15 and 23, they put two forward and they voted to see which one would replace Judas. And the group, the 120 that were gathered together, they're the ones that cast their votes. Acts 15 verses 22 and 25, that in choosing representatives to convey the decisions of the Jerusalem council. The church sent representatives to the council to come and hear what should Gentiles do that are coming into the kingdom. What should the Jewish believers make them do? Should they be circumcised or not? That was a big issue. But the church elected representatives for them to carry out a voice. And then in 2 Corinthians 8:19, we see selected a representative to help collect an offering and accompany Paul. And the church selected that representative, probably someone they could trust, someone that maybe they knew had a good relationship with Paul already, could travel with him wherever, but he would collect an offering. The church selected that person. So in the New Testament, generally, final governing authority seems to rest not with any group outside the church or any group within the church, but with the church as a whole, such as church discipline. Matthew 18:17, the whole church is called together to bring final discipline to an erring member. 1 Corinthians 5:4 teaches the same. Note, many of the epistles were written to churches. They weren't just written to the pastors, although there is a case for 1 and 2 Timothy and Titus as pastoral letters. The majority of them were written to churches. So you have Romans 1:7 to the saints in Rome, a bunch of house churches there. 1 Corinthians 1:2, the church at Corinth. 2 Corinthians 1:1, the church at Corinth. Colossians 4:16 talks about the church there and the church of Laodicea. You see these things. 1 Timothy 4:13, as Timothy's pastoring, a letter is being given to him to read it. He's to read the doctrine and so forth. And he pastors in Ephesus. There's more accountability to the congregation if the congregation selects the officers. If the congregation says, hey, we just voted on this guy to be our pastor, there's greater accountability because if they vote to hire him, they can also vote to fire him. Or if they elect deacons, if they say, hey, this deacon's not serving us well or whatever, they can decide what to do there. That's a congregational matter. False doctrine has historically been adopted first by the theologians of the church, that is, those who stand out, kind of teach in the seminaries and so forth, and then it gets passed on to the pastors and then to the laity. So if the congregation doesn't elect her elder, she can't have a say when such teaching's gone too far. So if a congregation realizes, hey, wait a second, what this guy's teaching us that we hired, he's off base. He's teaching us something that's false. They should be able to act. Whereas if it's a hierarchy approach and you just put somebody in there, the church, they have no say-so. They may decide to stop attending, but they have no say-so in whether or not that person's pastoring their church. Government works best when it has the consent of those governed. We see this in the Old Testament, Exodus 4, verses 29 through 31, and 1 Samuel chapter 7, verses 5 and 6, and 1 Samuel 10, 24, 2 Samuel 2, 4, 1 Kings 1, 39 and 40, and 1 Kings 12, verses 1 and 15. So when they understand that, then you understand that this is how the people that get a chance to have a voice in the selection. Sometimes people ask, well, what about Paul instructing Titus to appoint elders in every city? Well, of course, back then it was where they had churches, and so and they were just getting started out. Sometimes these churches hadn't started yet, and Titus is given an example to go and basically put some church planners in place to go get some churches started in those cities. And if you don't have a church there yet, then obviously the church can't call a pastor. So those church planners, those missionaries, those evangelists are going out and preaching the gospel and starting churches. That's different because they're the ones that are getting the church started. But as that church gets to start, and as that planter, that missionary ever dies off or moves away to go start another work somewhere else or whatever, that church has a responsibility then of choosing their next leader, as well as the deacons that might serve them among the body. So I hope that's helpful to you as we just touched on some places there in the Bible about what it says in terms of selecting church officers and how that is to be done.